Hey guys, my name is Eriko Schmidt and today I'm going to talk about my rather unusual instrument setup. As you can see here, my cello has no tailpiece and I'm going to talk about why I did it and how I did it. So let's start with why I did it and where this idea came from. About 8 years ago, I think it was in 2014 or 15, I saw a bass player in a music festival that had steel wires running from the string end to the button of his instrument. And I asked him why he had no tailpiece, and he said, well, it makes the instrument sound open a bit up, and it makes the response faster. And well, I had never seen anything like it, and never on a cello. So that stayed in my mind, and I decided sometime later that I wanted to try. And what happened is that one day I had a tailpiece that it was one of those plastic ones, and the fine tuner for the A string broke. So I thought that was the right time to try something different. And I went to my local luthier and asked him if he had any solution for that, and he happened to have Kevlar paraglider lines, and he used that to hold tailpieces. So instead of this kind of steel wire, he would use paraglider Kevlar lines. So I just asked him, well, we could do something to hold it directly. And so the first time I tried this was in the beginning of 2017, or maybe it was late in 2016. So what happened to my instrument sound? Did it get any better? Well, I think so. I have no A/B recording or any tests of any kind to prove it to you, but well, in my opinion, it did change for the better. It's not a new sound. It's it's easier to play, to start notes, so the attack is a bit lighter, and I think it gives a bit of more sound, like 2 to up to 5% more loudness. So I perceive that as a positive change, no downsides. So I just kept with it. So I think it's fair that now we take a closer look on how this thing is set up. First things first, you have to have gear pegs. These are the Kneeling gear pegs, not the Wittner ones that are, I think they are more popular. They differ by, first, the gear ratio, but also you can pull out and they unlock. You can see this space right here. And then you pull in and they lock back in place. So they work just like normal wooden pegs, except for they are much lighter and easier to fine tune, but you have to push in to keep them in place. And you have to have some kind of gear pegs, otherwise you'll have no fine tuning. Now onto my setup. It hasn't always been this way. I'll show my older tailpiece in a moment. So I have just tied a knot directly onto the ball ends of the strings. And on the lower strings, the ball ends were a different kind. They were solid. This is hollow. There's a hole through it. And so this was easy to split open. So I got a plier and I split open, and I just tied the knot through the loop end. And I have also reached the conclusion that the less weight you have here, the better it sounds. So I scraped this part of the finishing of the string up to where the winding gets rough. So there has no point in to keep scraping, because then you cannot use the upper part for actual playing. I didn't do with these ones, first because these ones are new, just changed, and I haven't yet changed the high ones. So I think that after you have this folding marked, it's not great to move the string up, because then you're gonna end up having a slight fold here. So when I have when it's time to change the upper strings as well, I'm going to shorten the string and do the same, because well, I think that the less weight you have there, the better the instrument sounds. And here I have each of them individually tied around this end pin support. So as you can see in this concert poster, before I had a slightly different setup. Let's check how it was. This is my very first prototype, and I keep this in my cello case, including 2 extra new lines. I fear that one day some of them might break, just like strings do sometimes, but so far so good. I never had one to break. This is tied right now, I keep it this way, but the difference is that in my first setup I had this steel ring tied to the string, and then I would insert the string through this hole and the ball end would stay inside this. This is cut from steel bicycle chainstay tubing. So the same tubing that made my custom steel bike was turned into a tailpiece, you know. So the luthier was really nice, so he cut and drilled the hole and spray painted. This was the first prototype. And one difference is that, as you can see here in this one big knot, is that all strings were tied together. So it was actually two cables, 2 wires that came from one string, and it would go to a knot that was about here, loop, go back, and then the other string. So it was 2 pairs. Now this is 4 individual wires. Now on this end, now I have ditched those rings. I think they are completely useless, and then you can just tie a knot that is just big enough so you can fit the string through and it will hold the ball end. But still, this knot is really easy to do and to undo. It's called the bowline knot, and it's no big deal to learn how to do it. So you can just untie and tie again every time you change the strings, and it takes like a few seconds to do. So you may have noticed that on this first prototype I was using several overhand knots, one on top of the other, so it wouldn't slip, because I didn't know anything about knots back then, just overhand ones. So I just tied several ones on top of each other and it worked. But you know, this is much more elegant. I'm sorry, here. It's just one single knot that stays in place. Another detail that is important, so I learned that, well, you cannot burn the ends of Kevlar lines, but you can, you know, add a bit of super glue around it before cutting and it will not split open. And I also added a bit of super glue around this part of the knot, so it is more, you know, solid, and there is no chance that this loop is going to cut the wire. I didn't have to do the same thing here because there are ball ends, and as you can see, the part of the loop that is holding is going around the ball ends. The one that goes through here is just so the tip doesn't stay, you know, loose open in there, but it has no, you know, use. It's just going through it, as you can see now, and that's it. It stays in place. So after those yellow lines, I was using this setup. You know, it's the same principle, but it was done again with a nicer brass finishing. But it was just exactly the same setup. It's still a bunch of overhand knots, and the luthier added, you know, this steel thing here to hold the tip. So it was nicely made. But these are actually a little bigger and heavier. And let's check how much weight was saved. Here is a scale. Hello. So just the ball ends together, 15 grams. And the setup before that, let's check. 8 grams for the whole thing. So this one is actually lighter, the first one. Now let's see how much one of these steel tailpieces weight. So over 100 grams. This is, I think it is steel, I'm not sure, it could be alloy. This was actually never on my cello. I had a plastic one that probably weighted nearly half, maybe 60 grams, 70 grams, I'm not sure, but you get the picture. So the logic behind this process is because, well, this is a wolf tone dampener remover, and it weighs 9 grams. And just this thing, if you want to remove the wolf tone from your E, if you have it, you know, suppose this one's the place. Anyway, I'm not going to add it, but you know how these works. And the whole sound, the sound of the whole instrument gets a bit worse if you have one of these hanging, you know, close to the bridge. Even if you have an orchestral mute that you leave here if you're not using, the sound of the whole instrument is a little bit worse. So any weight that gets close to the bridge is bad for the sound. That's my perception. So I just started removing everything. And well, I weighted these wires and they weigh like 2.8 grams now. And I could remove 1.5 grams here and probably another 2 or 3 grams if I shorten this. And I will actually do it later on. So I just have to make a new pair here. And when I change these two strings, I'm going to, you know, move everything up just like I did here. And I'm still looking for a way to split open this kind of hollow bow ends without actually cutting the wire, because I tested on old strings and that accident happened. So I'm not willing to lose a $40 string or $30 string just to cut the bow end, but if I find a safe way to do so, I'll do it. So now I'll show you how to tie the two knots that I'm using here. First is the left hand bowline knot. You start with a forward twist like this. Then this tip is going to come from underneath. It's going to loop around this part. Then it's going to come to the front again and go through this secondary loop here. So it should look like this. There's light pull. So there it is. The thing you will notice is this part comes at the top. If you looped around on the other way, it would come out in between the main loop. That's the common bowline, but it said that the left-handed bowline is stronger in terms of slipping. So there's no chance that it will slip. It's said to be better with synthetic ropes like Kevlar. Now to untie this knot, all you have to do is come to this tiny loop here and you pull it back like this, and then you can push this part of the string, and then everything basically comes loose. You just start pulling it apart and that's it. It's undone. The thing with the left-handed bowline and the common bowline as well is that it's said to be it's safe when you pull it this way, but if you add side loads to the ring loads like this, it can slip like it's doing right now. It can slip a little bit. So if you use this knot to tie the bottom part of the tailpiece around the end pin, you're going to have, you know, a bigger loop like this, and there will be some side load around the end pin. It's going to be like this, unless you tie this really long, which I did not. So if you want to have some side load, it's safer to do the Eskimo bowline knot, because it will not slip in side loads. Otherwise, the first few times you tune the string, it could go down a little bit So you have to retune a few times in a row until it settles. But the Eskimo bow line will not slip. So this is the Eskimo bow line knot. And you will start with the same forward twist, like such. And now you're going to enter this small loop from above, which is the opposite as we did before. And it's also going to come down into this big loop, like such. And it's going to loop around the big loop leg, like this, and go under the main line, and then under this tiny loop, and then it comes out. So as you see now, this part of the loop is going through the big loop leg instead of the main line as we did before. And then as you add pressure, and as you add pressure, it locks. And now this one is very, very safe in side loops. It's not going to come out, it's not going to slip, and you can also pull it in this direction as well. So for the bottom part, it's a little bit, there's one extra step and it's done in the opposite direction, but it's safe under load. And now under side load, ring load, and if you want to undo this knot, you pull this part back, and then you push this left leg of the loop through, and it comes loose, and you can undo it, and that's it. So now you have seen up close how my setup is made. I'll try to explain what exactly has changed. So the sound is a little bit more open than before. I cannot compare, and I'm not going to go back to a tailpiece just to show you, but as I remember my sound, it's now easier to start the notes. So doing something like this on the C string especially, it's much easier now. So it was a lot harder to make quick notes speak cleanly in the low register. And also the sound in the two lower strings as you go up. It's out of tune, but believe me, it's a lot easier to make it sound, and it sounds a lot better than before, in my opinion. On the other hand, on the A string, it's not such a big change on the high strings. It does have a lot more resonance, so something like, you know, you just let it sound, and it keeps sounding, it's still sounding. You know, more resonance, in part due to this is just sounds like all right, so a lot easier to do this cleanly. So I think it's overall win-win. Another point worth mentioning is, after I did this, a few of my colleagues who knew my instrument before, they tried it and they liked the idea. And now there is at least another 8 cellists in my town that are using this very same setup. And there is also a violinist who is using it. So Eva Giraca, who is the first violinist in the orchestra I work at, her violin has this same kind of setup. and she has been using that, you know, for 4 or 5 years, maybe more. Just a quick note, I'll leave links in the description down below for the materials needed for this setup if you want to try it. So the Kevlar lines and also the fine-tuning pegs if you don't already use them. I use the kneeling pegs because they are easier to fine-tune, and also when you pull them out it's easier to rotate them and change strings. It's a bit quicker. But they are a bit more complex to install, so your luthier might charge more for installing those instead of the Wittner ones. Wittner are a bit simpler to install. The thing is that they have tiny steps. When you are tuning, you can feel them under your fingers, like tack, 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 tack. And it can happen sometimes that the exact fine tuning is just between one step or the other. So you have to go back and forth, tack, 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 until like 3 times and you find the exact spot you want. And this does not really happen with the kneeling pegs that I use. Besides that, it's just super glue, and well, I can leave a link there below, but you probably have it at home. And that's pretty much it. I hope you like this idea. I'm just giving it away for free because, you know, there's no way I could make this something I could sell, because it's just a piece of string and 2 knots. So just do it yourselves. Buy a bunch of Kevlar line. They are not too expensive, so you can do it for your friends as well. You just have to have fine tuners, and your instrument is most likely going to sound better if you do it. So that's it. Thank you a lot for watching, and I hope you are going to give it a try, and let me know later in the comments if it sounds better for you, because for me it did improve the sound. Bye bye.